In deeper parts of the Gulf of Mexico, there's a lot of people call them springs, sinkholes, cracks, all kinds of different real big bottom that houses fish that you'd see typically on like wrecks or big structure. So I sent my camera down on one of these. So you can see here, this is I'll bring this back up later. So starting at 9 seconds is about the top of the water. And this is a spot in about 220 feet or so. And so the camera's going down. This particular, call it a sinkhole. It houses a lot of amberjack. You'll get some tuna, some bonita. A lot of bait seems to be around it. And then you'll get yellowtail snapper, red snapper, typical just big bottom offshore Gulf of Mexico fish. So as the camera's going down, you can see there's an amberjack. There's actually a couple permit right there. Which you'll see sometimes in the deeper Gulf on wrecks and springs, more permit over there. If you have crabs, you can kind of target those permit, but it's tough, getting them when they're 100 feet down versus up on the surface. So these amberjack get a little annoying at times when you're trying to flatline for tuna and whatnot. So the camera now is down. It's been going down for a minute. So it's probably about 100 feet down, I'd say. When I send it down, I try to do it at a consistent speed just so I know when it hits the bottom how deep it is at various points. And you'll see these amberjack kind of swim down. They're always, looking to see what's going down with the camera. There's a red snapper that's up in the water column. I'll bring that back up a little later. So can't even see the bottom yet. So at a minute 30, it's probably about 150 feet down, that red snapper was. Camera's still going down. So now you start to see a little bit of bottom coming in at a minute 45, 46. And so now you can start to see, if you see this darkness, the outlines of the sinkhole. It's probably about a basketball court wide opening, I'd say. Now you can kind of see some of the structure. So there's actually a hooked fish going up right there. There's some other ones looking at it as well. So there's a bunch of rock piles and whatnot around it. So now just after 2 minutes, so we're at about 2:09. So that's 2 minutes of a drop. So about 200 feet every 2 minutes, I'd say, on the drop. So now is when it gets interesting. So camera, I don't know where it's going when I'm dropping it. Camera now is going into the sinkhole. And if you can look, there's some lionfish. There's somebody's line that had been tangled on it before. There's some mangrove snapper. Not a ton of life around it on the bottom, but a decent amount. So camera's going now into the sinkhole. There's another vermilion snapper swimming down with it. Don't really see a whole lot, but this opening is pretty wild. So I accidentally send the camera. As I'm dropping it, I'm like, man, this thing keeps going and going and going. There's a scamp grouper that's actually in the hole, and it looks like something tried to eat him at one point because he has a big old scar on his back. Another vermilion snapper, some more little AJs or lesser AJs. So camera's still going down now. We're at 3 minutes, which I believe would be about 300 feet. And so now it's starting to hit bottom and I'm feeling it. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll slow down a little bit. But it just bumped the edges or the side of the sinkhole there. So it's still going down. So there's a red snapper now way down in it. So 3 minutes and 30 seconds coming up, which makes me think it's about 350 feet. And I hit kind of an edge here. And so I stop. So 3 minutes, 30 seconds. So I think this is about 350 feet or so. And there's still a giant opening. So this sinkhole keeps going and going with really no end in sight that you can discern. The light, obviously, when you get that deep is going to be less. I've seen some people send cameras down 400 feet in the middle of the day, and you get a little bit of light. Very similar to this if the clarity is good. And you could see when the camera was going down that the clarity was pretty good. And so since it's a little dark and it's in the middle of this hole, it's fairly uneventful video for the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. Scamp grouper still in the middle of the hole. There's been a couple times we've dropped baits and we're like, man, this thing just keeps going and going, and it's possible that we're going right into the middle of this sinkhole. So I'll fast forward a little bit. So it just kind of, the camera's not really seeing a whole lot, just the edge of the sinkhole here. Yeah, there's the giant opening. And when I actually go to leave this spot, we on the Rodan trolling motor, we're on a 32-foot contender. I'm like, well, let me go forward with the Rodan just to kind of reel the camera up a little bit and see if I can see where the hole is, not knowing that the camera's in the sinkhole. So I come very close to actually getting this camera stuck, which I will get to here. Let me go 30 speed. Try to get to the point where it starts being picked up again. Okay. So now the camera's out kind of in the open here as the boat was going forward, and I start to reel it up slightly. I just kind of like to if I'm leaving a spot and the camera's still down, just slowly get some more video just so I can kind of survey a spot. So very dark. Can't really tell a whole lot of what species are in here. There's been a couple times where we've just been absolutely freight trained by fish. It could be Goliath grouper, black grouper, who knows, something like this. Because it could house, obviously, a lot of different species, big species. Some interesting stuff. And so there's the edge of this. You can see there's some of these kind of cracks. It might be pretty dark in the side of the wall of the sinkhole. So part 2, the camera starts rolling again once it hits a certain file length. So now it's trying to come up. You can see a little more colors coming into it now as the boat's moving forward, and I'm reeling it at the same time. And as I'm reeling it straight into the side of the sinkhole. And so when it gets to a certain point, I'm like, well, I can't reel anymore. This is kind of bad. So I had to stop the boat, go back, realizing now that it was finally in the hole. So this is still the going up part. Kind of crazy to think there's just a vertical wall. So now the camera's stuck. I'm like, oh God, I finally have done it. I'm not getting it back. But then, bam, jerks out right there. So there's some big red snapper in this, in the edges around this hole. Kind of tough to see because it's getting jerked around as I yank it out of there. So red snapper. There's some other decent fish in the back. Kind of hard to make out exactly what everything is. There's the amberjack once again. There's a permit down at the bottom. If anybody's ever hooked a permit in 220 feet on the bottom, let me know how you did it, because I would love to try it here. Not a very big one. Typically permit fishing, you're using crabs and kind of floating them on the off the back of the boat. So I'm bringing the camera up pretty quick just because I had freaked out that, man, I got this thing stuck. And as it comes up through the water column, pretty uneventful. The boat had been moving. We had been fishing for a little bit, so some of the fish, I think, had scattered off at that point. Let's go through here. Now, we're chumming. Had a whole lot of action on the back of the boat. Some bonita, some tuna had come through, but nothing too crazy. This spot we've caught some real big snapper. The biggest one I caught this day was actually on a flat line, which surprised me. When I hooked the fish, I just grabbed the rod that was in the rod holder, and it started fighting straight down. I'm thinking, oh man, it's another big amberjack. And we had actually caught some amberjack and then a really big Jack Crevalle this day, which I didn't see any on the GoPro, but you could see them kind of swim by the boat at times. You could see this big yellow flash. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. But then we hooked one and realized that they're just absolute giant Jack Crevalles that'll appear on these spots. But hooked this fish, thought it was an amberjack, bring it up. And it was a giant red snapper. The biggest one that I caught this red snapper season was on a flat line. I actually was trying to hand the rod, see if anybody else wanted to fight one. Everybody had already fought an amberjack. And they're like, no, you bring this one in. And I'm like, fine. And then I see it, and I'm like, whoa, man, that's a giant red snapper. So that was pretty exciting. Occasionally, if the current's just right, you can chum up the yellowtails. Obviously, looking at the bottom, they weren't really here that day. We got, I think, 1 or 2 maybe right on the bottom. Small ones, but some of these spots out in 200 plus feet can have some 8 to 10 pound yellowtails. And if you can chum them up and use light jig heads, you can get some real big ones. Sharks can be problems on these spots. Luckily, not this day they weren't. None really seemed to be around us. We didn't have as much tuna action or bonita action, which I think contributes to bringing sharks in. When you get that blood going, you start gaffing fish, then the sharks will kind of move in. But yeah, these spots are pretty awesome. If you can get out real deep, just be prepared for anything. And you could get, giant black grouper, you could get mutton snapper, you could get red snapper, amberjack. Even these permit that I might try to catch now that I know they're out there. Just kind of bring some crabs, be prepared. Yeah, hopefully I'll leave some footage of just some other stuff we caught this day from the surface, and you can see kind of the action we were getting into. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. Visit my website, CaptainChappie.com. Sell a lot of quality tackle stuff that I use, jig heads, hooks, line leader, all that. So thank you very much. Enjoy. Yeah, that's tuna. Feel that tail cranking. Let me just get the drag good. Tuna or bonita. See that head shaking with the rod? Just to put it right, like in your groin. Put your right hand up pretty high, so you can get leverage with that left hand. There you go. You'll feel a nice sore spot in your groin tomorrow.
Good bait.
Okay, I'll just leave this rod up for the moment.
Yeah,
that was. I got my bail open, so you gotta get the thing in. Might be the biggest jack I've ever seen. Ooh, what was that? Oh, tuna! There's tuna right there.
Oh, look at him. Nice guy.
Right in the jugular. Yeah, that's a fat one too. Holy crap.
What a butterball.
All right, you get your picture with that one. Dude, that's a chunky one right there.
Here, unhook and I'll cast it in here.
That's a nice mahi. I mean, it's instant when you get down there. Anybody want to gaff it? Oh, yeah. Nice. All right.
He was hooked real good. I saw it.
Wow, what a beautiful fish.
Yeah. There's 2 in the box right now, and this was.
Still 4, I think.
Yep. I gotta get them bigger weights.